There's a lot not to like. Um, uh, Not that I dislike much of it, and it's hard to quibble with a movie that's this engaging. But my wife said to me, it's just a mystery, a thriller in disguise of the Vatican. It's not, it didn't, I realized, oh my God, I was in love with the filmmaking and not with the film. Of course, it wasn't a real accomplishment. I mean, the art direction, the camera work, the direction, the performances. Oh my God, Ray Fiennes and Stanley Tucci, just solid performances. And even John Lithgow, when I first saw it, I said, I see him every time when I hear his voice. And this time I didn't. I saw him as a character. So that's something too. Um, and so I want to talk about the character development in this. Uh, there's a great way of introducing each of the major players in this. And I want to cite, um, the Pope dies and they say Kaddish when he's in bed. Did you get that? One priest says something and the audience responds with another prayer. It's probably part of a lot of funeral services. I thought it was interesting. And they remove the body, and there's this great scene where it's from the inside of the ambulance, and the Pope is in the body bag. It's white, and it's very diffused, and there's the flashing red and blue lights of the ambulance. And I thought that was a remarkable choice to make to get us past that transition of, okay, that's what they did with the body. But I think it's more meaningful than that. It says call attention to this, but the issue of light is a motif in this film. Um, and you'll notice in the opening scenes, it's all filmed in very dark light, and their faces are in shadows, half shadows. And when Lawrence, that's the Ray Fiennes role, comes into the room, Lithgow, as Cardinal Tremblay, interrupts a conversation with him and the Pope's attendant. Say, oh no, I have all the information here. Here's a timeline of his last day, and here's who we met. And what does that tell us about Tremblay? Anything? If somebody did that to you and unexpectedly flooded you with details, you'd say they're very controlling. Right? Think of the controlling people you know. They have to be in control of every situation. Of course, Tremblay knows that none of us know that he was dismissed by the Pope as not fit to be in the Curia, in the priesthood. The Curia is the inner circle of cardinals, but he would let him finish his days in some place like Afghanistan. And so Lithgow knows he's guilty, but we don't know it yet. And he's going to play the next half hour of the movie before we begin to suspect him. So that's great character exposition. And whether or not we know of his crime, we know that he's trying to be in control. In a situation, as some of us know, like this, tempers fray, unfinished business with the deceased come up. It's a fraught time. So Tremblay says, uh, no, that's Bellini, that's Stanley Tucci. It didn't end well. And Bellini speculates perhaps the Pope lost faith in the church. Powerful sentence, right? Coming from a cardinal. And we learn later on, there's a big bombshell later on about that. But let's save that. So that's number one. That's how we learn Tremblay's character. And when what's his name? The Tedesco arrives in grand style, the last one in, and Lawrence, Ray Fiennes, embraces him, and it's this warm, polished embrace. But we know that they're on two political sides in the church. Tedesco wants to go back to Latin masses, to ignoring women, giving gays no place in the church, and Lawrence and the current pope represented progress, the future, the present and the future. And this is a divide that goes through the whole film. It's why we have Tedesco as the antagonist. First, it's Adeyemi, the black cardinal, who's just a competitor, and then we realize he wasn't fit to be pope either. But who knows what side of the political issue he was on? But it's really about, this is all about the church. Everything these guys do is about the church because everything they do is controlled by the church, except their own machinations and ambition. So we know that Cardinal Lawrence, Ray finds, is capable of a theatrical embrace. He doesn't mean it, but he knows he has to do it for political sake, for appearing to be a fair moderator of the conclave. And that's interesting too. It means he can be a political chameleon where he has to, when he doesn't feel it's compromising himself. And then the issue comes up, the unknown priest from Kabul arrives unannounced, and they speculate, what would the Pope want? Why would he be here? And they decide, well, the Pope would want him here because the Pope appointed him, we don't know why, to Afghanistan. They research his record, and he served in missions, all war zones. So the Pope wanted to keep him under wraps. We don't ask why. It's just the Pope shuttled him around the world, the Congo, Afghanistan, elsewhere. And okay, so let's go. You know that auditorium with the blue seats they sit in? It's like they're talking together, and it's kind of open. That, it's like they weren't assigned those seats the way they were assigned the seats in the Sistine Chapel for voting, right? This is free for all. It's just the guys, the inner circle, talking among themselves. And I think it's Tucci who says later on when okay, so that seat where they're sitting, it seems unassigned. That represents how fractured they were as a committee, you know. And even in the cafeteria, in the dining room, Tedesco points out, oh, the Spaniards are here, the French are here, the English are there. Of course we're fractured, and none of them speak Latin now. So Lawrence eventually corners Tremblay. Remember that scene? And he questions him. And the end of the scene is when Tremblay makes himself coffee, to dismiss it. This is just light stuff. What did you say? Nothing. He's very friendly. He sent me home. And, you can see a little something in that denial. Lawrence pressed him pretty hard, and he denied pretty hard. And then they talked about Pope's last words. And this introduces the concept of doubt. What did the Pope mean and when did he mean it? And doubt is a huge issue in the church because doubt is an expression of an antagonist to faith. And several times they say, faith is what makes being alive tolerable. You need faith because there are no answers. Moving on. Please chime in if you have a thought on any scene that moved you. Just because I made notes doesn't mean you can't address them or anything. Oh, and I want to point out, if you ever see this film again, the camera compositions are just stunning, especially in the choices in the Sistine Chapel, everywhere. I mean, they're framed beautifully, the wide shots, the close-ups. It's a big deal. Steve Zimmerman, you had a comment? Your hands up, unmute.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I agree that it was a beautifully filmed movie. The atmospherics were really cool. I liked the movie, but my sense is that you knew right away, almost at the beginning of the movie, who the bad guys were. I mean, you could almost see through it. In a sense, I found it kind of transparent.
Okay.
The characters, Tedesco and Lithgow's character. Yeah, I mean, you could just taste that they that they were going to be culprits. And it was just going to be a question of time as it unfolded to exactly see how. The other thing, of course, that you can't escape is the irony of this conflict over the role of diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI, given what's going on in the real world now with Trump, right? I mean, I don't know when exactly this movie was made, probably before Trump was elected.
Nominee for this year's Academy Awards.
Yeah, so it was probably made within the last year and a half or something.
Yeah.
But before Trump was elected.
Yes.
But very, although it's a very hopeful message at the end, boy, it just collides head on with the real world at the moment, which is kind of distressing. But anyways, we can keep talking. Those are just a couple preliminary observations.
I think you're right. The first time I saw it, I didn't quite know. Tedesco's easy to suspect because they whisper about him. He's regressive. He wants to return to Latin, and so clearly there's a line drawn in the sand. Tremblay, and seeing it this time, I realized presenting all the timeline and the people who saw the Pope, that made me very suspicious. I could see how you felt that way. There's something kind of sleazy about him.
Yeah.
He's well prepared.
The other question mark I kind of had, given the way the plot was set up, was what was the cause of death of the Pope? I mean, I thought they were going to imply or suggest somehow that there was foul play, that yes. He was healthy, he seemed to be doing fine, and then boom, he's dead right after he fires.
Somebody did ask what was the cause of death, and the answer was, we think it was a heart attack.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know most whodunits and detective stories, there's always the coroner's office and there's the autopsy, and exactly.
The television shows are big on autopsy.
But they had they made it look like, well, gee, this is a very suspicious death all of a sudden. But I guess not. I mean, they basically suggested by the end of the movie that he was just ill and that hadn't told anybody.
Yep. Brad and Karen, you have your hands up?
Yeah, I want to come back to your point about doubt, because I thought it was very telling that Lawrence, when he delivered his speech, he quoted Christ, who in his 9th hour on the cross, he himself doubted and uttered those very famous words, Lord, why have you forsaken me? So, at the heart of Christianity is this question of doubt. So I thought that was really an important reminder. And then in terms of the different denials that go on in the movie, you can't help but think of Peter, who was, of course, the founder of the church, who denied Christ 3 times. So, at the heart of Christianity is denial as well. Or at least the Catholic Church.
The church. I agree. And in a way, the church was established to do away with the doubt while keeping it alive, because it's a business. You see, you need the church and its officers to guide you through your doubt, because there is no proof. And so they establish a need for themselves, because we all know that uncertainty in movies, as in life, is a very scary thing. And especially in the beginning of the Anno Domini AD, it was just as scary then, if not more so, because people didn't live very long. And it was it was a, what do you call it, sustenance living. They had what they could have to live as long as they did, but most people were not prosperous at all, but subsistence living. Linda Schatzer.
Yeah, I had a comment about the pacing of the film. As they were progressing through the film, it seemed to be evenly paced, especially with the voting, and they would go back over and over again. But then, as we started getting towards the close to the 2-hour mark, all of a sudden he makes the Kabul cardinal makes this inspirational speech, and then everybody votes for him, and then
Right.
the movie ends. So I thought it was a bit rushed at the end, in terms of maybe some reflection on we did know his situation, and I also they did so much vetting on Tremblay, and then the black cardinal. Why didn't anybody do further vetting on the candidate they all decided to vote for? So I just thought that the ending was less believable than the first three-quarters of the film.
I think somebody says in it, well, popes, we've had murderers and rapists and deniers as popes all the time throughout our history. We serve an ideal, but we are not ideal ourselves. So there's a justification, a culture of we'll look the other way, especially when it comes to personal peccadillos, as the church did with the sex scandal, the Boston diocese. Um, and part of the problem is the denial until it's finally undeniable. And you pay a lot of money or you go to jail, except for Donald Trump, who
Right.
is a master denier. But thank you for that. I think you're right. Suddenly, the guy, be right with you, the guy, Benitez, just makes this wonderful speech coming out of nowhere. But he does something else before that. Lawrence introduces him in the dining hall to the groups who are assembled. And he says, will you say grace for our meal for us? So he says the traditional grace, and people begin to pick up their forks and spoons. And he stops them. He said, no, there's more. And he delivers this totally, compassionate, understanding, care for the sick and the poor, don't discriminate speech that nobody's ever told these cardinals before, that should be our mission. So Linda, you're right. He makes the one speech and then he gets elected. We see none of the behind the scenes people encouraging others to vote for him. He certainly doesn't lobby for himself. He's too humble a man. But you're right. It does proceed very fast, and there's a lot that's not shown that does that. But I think by that time, after that speech, we need to move pretty quickly because all the cards are in play. I think we got rid of Tremblay before that. Forgive me, I don't want to look it up in my notes. I forget the order. But I think we were rid of Tremblay before that. He was disgraced in the dining hall again, because they found out that he wanted the nurse he called the nurse up himself, but nobody can ask the dead Pope about that. David Bornstein, you had something to...
Yeah, I was going to say, I expected this to be kind of like another Da Vinci Code, and that because there was one where there was a pope who was murdered.
Yeah.
And so I was waiting for them. You were saying before about why didn't they ever get into why he died? And I realized that that was not what the movie was about. The movie was just about the politics and what goes on. And when they have the conclave, which to me was interesting, and I thought the timing of the film, in a sense, was pretty good because I was right. I said, wait, I think it came out not too long before the election.
Oh, yeah, it came out in December, I think.
Yeah, so it was like right after the election, and I was thinking, man, I wonder if this is some commentary and all this other stuff because there is a lot of backroom stuff that goes on in elections, and this is really nothing more than an election.
Right.
Politics.
It's men in back rooms talking about deal making,
Yeah.
That's what it is. But it's dressed up in really great gowns,
Mhm.
great settings. By the way, the Sistine Chapel was a set. So they didn't blow out the windows of the Sistine Chapel. They built the set. And a lot of the film takes place there, so they could afford it. It's my suspicion that all the exteriors did take place in the Vatican, but they did not allow them to shoot inside any of the Vatican buildings. So
Yeah, I would think so.
long hallway where the the cardinals were sequestered, that was a set. Not too difficult to build because it's all like plywood and paint or it was not that difficult. A couple fluorescent lights, very barren hallway. Of course, the rooms themselves had marble walls. That was interesting too. But they only had to build like 2 of those. So, not a cheap movie. I'm not trying to say that, but they did the fake stuff really impressively. Leslie and Paul, you had a comment?
Yeah, one of the things that I found well, let me start off with saying, as the film started, I was thinking, geez, isn't this how Congress used to operate? And, but apart from that, kind of crack, one of the things that intrigued me is how much time and attention all of the principal characters, but also probably the other cardinals, spend trying to understand what the prior Holy See, the Pope who had just died, wanted to see happen. And the dean, who is the manager of the conclave, the process, spends a lot of time, the Ray Fiennes character, thinking about
Mhm.
what the intentions were
Yeah.
and what some of the things that the prior Pope had done, including elevating the person who was then selected, the cardinal who was then selected.
Yeah.
And obviously, because it was revealed, the prior Holy See did not want Tremblay to be the Pope.
Right. That's kind of the mystery behind the scenes that we didn't know about, but was
Right.
in
So
action.
the
It's
extension,
like the Pope was the Pope was a master screenwriter who figured out all these plot points to distract us from the real criminals. Paul, you had something?
no, I was just gonna say, I think it's an intriguing part of the process that's revealed. And I think that's one of the aspects of the movie that I actually kind of liked.
Mhm.
Something that I didn't care for is that, I don't know exactly how many cardinals there are or were assembled. Obviously, all cardinals come to Rome for the conclave, but there's so many of them. We hear nothing from them. We just hear how they voted.
Yeah,
And
you're right.
I think it would have been an
They're
enhanced.
minor players because we're focusing on
Yeah,
the big shots here. It's
yeah,
a chess game, and all the power players were shown, and the pawns didn't need to be seen. We didn't know who, we really didn't have an indication of who voted for whom on that first vote, or any of the other the backdoor stuff for the second and the third and the fourth, fifth vote, the deals that were made, and they accused Tremblay of buying votes to keep him in the standings. And they had the records. That wasn't quite clearly explained. But the difference between this and contemporary politics is not what they say and do, but that we get to see it. This is human nature and ambition knocking heads with each other, or various human natures knocking heads, people knocking heads with each other and fighting for dominance. That's ambition. And of course, according to Benitez and uh, the past pope, no, we should be about harmony. I want to go back to a moment when before the first vote, Lawrence gives a homily, a sermon. And it's funny these terms came up because the three important concepts in his sermon, he throws away his script, which is cool. And he says, okay, now I'm going to be honest with you. You know all that. They're diversity, certainty, and doubt. We've covered them all. And he's saying, diversity keeps us together. Certainty is a danger because it makes us listen to false idols or it makes us too confident. And doubt is good because it keeps us on our feet, keeps us engaged. And of course, as I said, the church does a great job of distracting people from doubt until they, prohibit conception or abortions, or it's like the church as a functioning body is also human, filled with human foibles and antiquated patrimonial traditions. So I think it's he's really trying to set the stage for this is really what this vote is about. And they make a silent prayer. And regarding the votes, they make a big deal out of the first vote, right? People slowly going down the aisle, saying the prayer, or swearing that it's theirs, dropping it in the urn. And so we know all the details. There's the filmmakers are saying, we don't have to see this again. We know how it's done. Just get us to the beginning, the outcome of the vote. So every time we have a vote, it gets more and more abbreviated. The last vote really featured there were single shots of the players and to build up the tension of who it was. And of course, Lawrence, says this great stuff, but we don't know who was elected yet. And then the surprise is cuts to Benitez, surrounded by the people at the Last Supper. So that is a great reveal. None of us have ever seen it or imagined it, but that shows you how entrenched in ritual the church is. I mean, in a way, it's like a bride walking 7 times around the groom. It's a sweet ritual, but everybody does it, in the Orthodox community. So every culture, every religion has rituals, and that's what is a sign of unity.
Process.
If you participate in a ritual, that means you're part of the tribe. And there's so many rituals, both in Judaism and Catholicism. It keeps you pretty busy. And by the way, has anybody ever read a book? There's a woman who wrote a book. She celebrated every Jewish holiday for a year. And it's worth reading. My wife read it, so I don't have to. But fascinating, and you realize, oh my God, there's so much I didn't know about Judaism. Now, a lot of it's ritualistic. The Hanukkah candles were invented in, I don't know what century, I think 10th century. And there are other things that are affectations that come along the way, but we do it. Confirmation in the religious school is new. It's probably an American, a Jewish tradition. I don't know. So let's move on. Please interrupt me at any time. But Benitez, he shows himself another way. Yes, Leslie?
I just wonder if anyone else thought that the ending was contrived. I just thought that I forget the fellow who is
Pope?
Pope, but I didn't feel that we needed to then go on to, discuss the intersex and it came out of nowhere. It felt very contrived. It felt like it was hung on the end. And
Okay.
there was nothing about the film, and it wasn't, sometimes in a film there's a surprise at the end and you're like, oh, what a surprise. To me, this felt just like a hanging chad. It's just,
I could see how you feel that way. I could see how you feel that way.
yeah. So I'm curious what other people thought.
Yeah. Okay. Marina, do you have something to say about that? And then I'll chime in, and then Steve.
Indeed, the movie, the body of the movie was about politics, about corruption, our traditional views of what's going on behind the scenes, whether it's in our life or in the church life. And then this comes as a surprise. But I didn't think it was contrived. It was a shock, but for me, it was that there are many wonders. This is one of them, and that's what the newcomer, who is not part of the politics, who is not part of the establishment, brings to the plate. Not only is he different in thinking, he's also different bodily somehow.
We'll come back to that. I want to go to Steve next, and then Brad and Karen.
Yeah, well, I think the film director or the writer had an agenda. I mean, it was a very idealistic agenda, right? I mean, it's kind of contrived, but you accept the plot the way it's written. Surprise ending, yeah. It's a little strange, yeah. But it's so idealistic. I mean, there are elements of the movie that just aren't realistic, like the sister coming into the conclave and blowing up Lithgow's character. That's not going to happen in reality. But I mean, it's a nice ploy, but it's touching, but not realistic. But okay, you can sort of say that about the ending too. He suddenly. New Pope has a uterus. Oh, really? Okay. Like they didn't investigate that, right? Okay. But there was an agenda to the film. That's how I look at it.
Okay. Now let's go. I want to trace back the insinuations about the new pope. First, he's from Kabul. Where is that? And who, we didn't know he was appointed. It was a secret. Why is he here? Well, I think the Pope probably wanted that, says Lawrence. So they invite him in. Now you have to remember throughout this whole thing that Lawrence and Bellini, that's Fiennes and Pucci, they were the two closest cardinals to the Pope. They were in the inner circle. So that's why they're so emotional about what would the Pope want. And there's an old saw in Hollywood about Walt Disney that after he died, the animation department, when they were stuck on a problem, they'd say, well, what would Walt want? And of course that stifles creativity because, when you have to create your own solution, you have yourself to it, which you want in a movie. You don't want to copy somebody else's, although the blockbuster movies, the franchise movies are just that. Brad?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it was a surprise, but I think it was prepared for. We certainly were given hints that there were medical issues there, but I think it was in perfect keeping with the theme of that which is hidden. Because, I come back to your comment about the curia before, because I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding. The curia uh, are not other cardinals. The curia is the bureaucracy. It's the government of the church, and it is a notorious viper's nest. And that's why so many of these traditions have developed over time to hide what's happening from the curia, from the members of the curia who can behind the scenes work to sabotage what the Pope is trying to accomplish. And when we see that with the Pope today, his hands are tied in so many ways because of the curia. So I think it's all part of a theme about hiding and hiding yourself, hiding oneself, and as a way of protecting oneself or the group.
Well, Tremblay hid his relationship to the young woman.
Absolutely.
And Adeyemi denied his relationship to that woman. People are hiding stuff all the time in a way, like you said, it's the bureaucracy of the church is known for that. It's so big and vast. Stuff happens. Secrets are kept. But let's talk about the reveal of the uterus. It's more than, it doesn't come out of nowhere. I'm sorry, Linda, if that's what you meant to say. All along, first it's who is this guy? Where'd he come from? And then there's a private scene between Lawrence and Benitez, and it's when he asks for Benitez. Well, I forget what they said in the first private scene, but Benitez establishes his reputation as a peacenik. Right, he's different from all the other. He's not a player. That's what I gleaned from that first conversation. The next time they're together is when Lawrence says, vote for Bellini. I don't want to do it, and we got to defeat these other guys. And Benitez says, no, I can't. I'm not going to pick the lesser of the evils. My conscience tells me you are the person to be Pope. Why? Because he's seen him act running the conclave. The fairness and the he conforms to the requirements of it, yet he keeps everybody in check. So that's something else. Wow, this guy's really different. Everybody else, their votes are fungible, are switchable. The big blow up is after the bomb, excuse the pun, and they all convene. They're covered with dust from the explosion right away. They're in that blue auditorium, and Tedesco says, "This is moral relativism. This is why we're going down the drain. Our culture has no meaning. We have no cohesive force. Those immigrants, man, they're taking your jobs, even though none of you people will work for $15 an hour." And it's this cultural rant that's so much like Trump. Sorry, I don't mean to debase Tedesco, but that's the way it is. And it's virulent, it's really savage. And you can tell people really like it. They applaud afterwards. And then Benitez gets, and he says, is this who we really are? This shy, quiet, humble little man calms everything down, and he asks the question, look at yourself in a mirror. Can you really do this knowing what the ideals of the church are? And I forget his last what he said, the end of his speech. Sorry, it's worth going over because I wrote down well, it'll have to wait. I'm not finding it. I can't read my own
Is
writing.
that where he says, Jim, is that where he says the church is about what we do next? The church
Well,
is
next, yes,
next.
that's what Benitez says.
After saying it's not tradition.
Right.
It's
At the end of a long run, that's the concluding line. The church is what we do next. We will be judged on what we vote here. Betty?
Yeah, I kind of agreed going back to what Linda was saying. I agreed with some of that because I felt like I really was very involved in this movie, and I still enjoyed it very much. But at the towards the end, when they had that vote, how did, it didn't make sense to me that everybody knew to vote for the guy from Kabul, because even Lawrence, if I'm remembering it right, voted for himself. So he didn't know people were going to do that. And Lawrence didn't want the position. But I think maybe he thought other people would vote.
I couldn't read his ballot. Was very hard to read what was on his
I
ballot.
thought he voted for himself, unless I'm misremembering it. So I thought that would be the norm if all these other people, because of all the scandals and corruption, were being ruled out, that people would vote for Lawrence, but then they suddenly voted for. So to me, that piece really didn't fit. But the other thing was I wondered about, which I thought was really interesting, was a little bit before that, they had said, well, we've really got to decide soon or the church won't look good, because it'll look like we're unsure if we take a long time to make a decision. So I wondered if that was part of why it moved so quickly at that point.
Well, let's say they hadn't developed any other, they didn't do any news headlines saying, oh, church delays its decision, it just wasn't an issue. But I want to go back to what you said. Why did so many people vote for Benitez?
Yeah.
He was persuasive. He shamed them into voting. He didn't say vote for me. He just said vote for what the church is going to do next. So search your hearts and you know who you have to vote for. And that fell totally into place for me. And we were headed towards that. Marina?
I agree with you. I raised my hand before you said that. To me, the last voting was cathartic. It looked like everybody somehow calmed down. And I didn't see what name Lawrence wrote on his ballot. So I didn't know who he voted for. But I was relieved when everybody voted for a new guy, because I thought they were voting for someone tarnished and purer than everybody touched by politics and corruption.
I think you're absolutely right. That's what he represented to them. Mitch?
I wanted to discuss the role of the women in the film and how much it's influenced what happened, whether it be the situation with the head nun who addressed the cardinals, or the situation with the nun who came from Africa to confront the cardinal, or what happened with the end and him having a vagina ovaries. I mean, the women were the really the directors of the film, and they wound up, I think, influencing the ultimate decision.
Decision to vote?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, let's say the scandals persuaded everybody, and there were women behind the nurse scandal. So that was the Tremblay scandal. And Adeyemi, who had fathered a child while he was a priest, he was 30, she was 19. And that's what the ruckus in the dining hall was about. I mean, okay. So women are always at the center of controversy, you know, they're human too, you know.
Amen.
Who wants someone who won't ask questions like Leslie Paul and Paul?
You know, a couple people brought up a minute ago, who did Lawrence vote for at the end? And I think that is a question we could talk about.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't know who he voted for in the end, and I think that's what's interesting. Remember, there's the whole discussion of I believe he really did not want to be Pope.
Yeah.
But he had thought of the name just in case.
Yeah.
John. And I think that is a question for us to talk about his ambivalence or lack of ambivalence, or who did he vote for in the end. I think that's kind of a juicy question about the film leaves us with.
Okay. I always say, don't let the facts ruin a good movie for us. We don't know. It doesn't say. So we can't write the script that the authors of this film chose.
He wrote Lawrence on his last ballot.
Did it? Was it Lawrence? He voted for himself.
I paused it. I took a look.
Okay, yeah, it was hard to read. Okay,
he wrote Lawrence.
But the reason he did was he's trying to be true to himself. You know, he's challenged by Benitez and by Tucci, who
I think got tucked into it.
Yeah, well, he had talked into it by Benitez or Bellini or both.
Both, I think. I mean, I think the Stanley Tucci character, Bellini, right? I think he said, look, I can't win. You're like our last best hope.
And I think at some point somebody said, you have to pick a side eventually, you know, and somehow, even in today's world, you have to take a stand or you'll be run over. You know, you have to be part of the solution or go down in flames. And if you're not part of the solution, then you also go down in flames. Mitchell, are you waving or?
Didn't Lawrence question his faith?
Yes, he did.
Kind of seemed like when he retired, he was going to become an ordinary person. I kind of felt like he was wavering from the church throughout.
No, he was just tired of the bureaucracy and the politicalization of the church. He was going to be a priest in some small village. You know, he's going to be a community priest and just deal with a small flock. Remember, he said, I'm the shepherd. I'm not the shepherd, I'm the manager. And he just couldn't imagine, you know, that was his reason for not aspiring until Tucci says, everybody wants to be Pope. What was your name, John? But so everybody was called into question. And Lawrence, being who he was, you know, finally got truthful with himself. Brad?
Yeah, I think Benitez asked him if he's having a crisis of faith.
Yes.
And he says, he responds, prayer.
Yeah, that's all.
Prayer.
That's all.
That's not the same thing.
No, as a crisis in faith.
As a crisis in faith. I
mean, God, give me the strength to believe that you exist, or God, help me through this and make me the best manager of the conclave. You know, it was a bit unclear for me. Linda, you
had a question.
Who said that? Oh, Joe, the Jasper. Go ahead. Lower left corner, the microphone, click it once.
There it is. Okay.
So in the New York Times book review section, the interview was with the author of the book.
Yeah.
And the book came out, I think, in 2016, something like that.
Yeah.
And he said there was no question, no one questioned the end of the book. He said now that the movie came out, all of a sudden, it's very controversial, the end. And my comment was, no one read the book, I guess, or no one commented, but so many more people watched the movie.
Right.
And I also felt that the cardinal from Kabul was the most compassionate.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what drove everyone in the end to vote for him. And he was moving forward. The church has to, at some point, move forward. And that's why they voted for him.
Yeah, I agree. Linda.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment about the women. I was watching the film. I said, "Oh, that's Isabella Rossellini." I hadn't seen her in a really long time. But the women told the truth. When she came in and she said Tremblay lied. I mean, he definitely was behind that. She was credible. Everybody believed her. And even, with the Black Cardinal, the accusation, the women were believable. So I think, that was on a positive note about the women in the film.
It's interesting that when Lawrence is with Isabella Rossellini at her desk, and he says, I need to know this. But before, I think he said, even if I know this, I can't report it to the conclave, but I need to know. He needs to know all the time. So he wouldn't tell the conclave once he read what was on the computer screen. She leaves him to it. He wouldn't do that because that's sort of outside his charge, or maybe he wasn't morally strong enough to do it. And Rossellini goes out there and just lays it out, right? Women are the truth tellers. I think you're right, and a good thing because these guys really needed a shakeup. Okay. Any other comments people want to make?
One more scene that deals with women.
Yeah.
And that's at the end when the Ralph Fiennes character, when the light finally comes back into the room.
Right.
But all right. And he looks out the window and he sees the three young novices kind of skip out of the building, chatting with each other, and again back to this, and he smiles, and it's reminiscent of The Innocent, right? I think it's a nod to the new Pope's name, The Innocent, and he sees these three young women happily kind of skipping and chatting with each other, and that innocence, that the direction, the next place that the church hopefully will go.
That's the future of the church.
Women there.
Yeah. Good observation. All right. We wish every member of our Congress could see this. But yeah, that instance of opening the window and the light comes in and he sees, this issue of light is important because light is a symbol of God, of enlightenment, right? It's, what do they say? The best cure for deception is fresh air or sunlight, because it makes all the lies more visible. So if there are no more comments, I want to poll you on our next meeting. We can only meet in February, and I think it's going to, what? Somebody say something?
Yeah, Jim, I was just going to make a comment about the, I don't know how to explain it. This, the lack of unity in the church or whatever, as demonstrated by the language confusion in the 1 minute they're speaking Latin, the next minute they're speaking Italian, then they're speaking in English, and it's like the Tower of Babel. In a church where you're no longer supposed to be using Latin, you're supposed to be using the vernacular. So it was really, I think the language confusion just gave credence to this lack of unity in the organization.
Yeah, because people who don't speak the same language don't understand each other.
Exactly.
Yes, welcome. Go ahead.
One thing that I'm picking up is, given all the characters, I thought it was interesting that all the cardinals voted for change.
You mean at the very end?
They knew he was going to bring change to the church and be more compassionate, etc. But they all voted for him at the end.
Was it unanimous? I forget. No, at least there was one. Lawrence voted for himself.
Yeah, but it was basically unanimous.
Yeah. Well, I think, as I said before, he was shamed. The group of cardinals was shamed into voting the right way, not to go backwards into the past, but to pick a light to move forward with. And Benitez is the strongest voice for that in the film, and that's kind of what he represents. Speaking of the discovery that he has female parts, it was a surprise to me and everybody else in the audience I saw it with, because it's a huge bombshell. It's a challenge to the church if it comes out, but it's a good challenge, but it's going to blow the church up. So that's why he's so shocked, and he has to back off and sit down. And then Benitez comes over and sits, face to face with him, and even takes his hand. And he said, "Don't worry, we're going to do the right thing. I am just the way God made me, and I have to accept that." And that seems to assuage him, and even though he votes for himself, but he's genuinely pleased by the election at the end.
Jim, do you
Yeah.
think the Pope sent him to Switzerland to see if he could be fixed?
Yes.
Yes.
Right, but we don't know that until that very last scene. So, yeah, this is a good point, Mitch. The Pope was like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, pulling all the levers, or the puppeteer pulling all the strings of the marionettes. He had this grand plan. He ordered Tremblay to ask the woman to come forward because he knew that she would cause Adiyami to blow his lid and lose his place. It's like Lawrence says, "No, you'll never be Pope. I forgive you. Everybody else can, but you'll never be Pope." Why? Because you know them. If there's a sense of scandal, they're going to stay away from it. It doesn't, right or wrong. So you're finished. And he was.
I have one thought on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Pope arranged for him to go to Switzerland.
Yeah.
His personal funds, he said.
Out of his personal funds, but I think it was a test of character. And that he actually, Benitez asked, once he got to Switzerland and said, "I can't do this."
Yeah.
And the Pope knew that was the answer that Benitez has. And that, I think
It's
that's
great to think so, because he's a progressive Pope. But my God, what a screenwriter he is to think of all the moving parts of this.
But
And
it's also that he's not excluded from being a human.
right. Well, that's the point. And this Pope tried to live that way too, but that's the thing. It's more important that, Lawrence asked him, "So you were once a man, but what are you now?" And he said, "I'm the way I always was, or the way God made me." So he doesn't define himself. He's, what do they call it? Non-binary. It's me. By the way, we have, there's some Indian cultures in this country, or in Hawaii, I forget, that have a third gender. And they're totally accepted into society as functioning members. It's just their cultures have seen this so often for so long. Well, okay, as long as they don't, blow us up and destroy our tribe, why not? And so it's culturally, it's interesting. Whether the church will accept it or not is up to us. See, that's the threatened time bomb that the movie leaves us with. And I think that's a good thing, because as soon as I heard that, I said, "Oh my God, what's this going to do to the church?" And we're slowly let down by the denouement of that scene where he says, "I am as God made me." And then when Lawrence opens the window, light comes in, he sees the three novices, like that's it. The last image of the film is the three novices giggling across the courtyard. And that's a political statement. That's the next church. Not that it's going to be all women, but women have a place. Anybody else?
Are you going to vote for this as best picture?
No, I voted for Amelia Perez.
Oh, did you? Oh.
Yeah. Now, again, I want to talk about who's seen Wicked, 3 hours of Wicked. Did you care for it at all? In its own way, Joanne, you can.
Yeah, no, I thought it was okay. I was a little disappointed. I didn't think it was as good as the play.
Well,
and I was a little disappointed in it. Certainly entertaining and visually beautiful.
yeah, visually beautiful, and so was this film. You know, it was so outrageous visually. It was an explosion of color and movement every scene. I mean, that library where the men are and women are dancing on that rotating whatever it was, clockwork. That's just fabulous invention there. It may have been CGI, I don't know, but that's another film that is just so stunning you can't take your eyes off it. It's seductive because every scene is so gorgeous, and the writing flows so well. And you know, that's Hollywood, but is it a great film? It's artful. Yeah, it's like I said, you can fall in love with art, artfulness, artistry, you know. But if a movie doesn't affect you profoundly, it's not a great film, because movies have affected people profoundly for years, for decades. So that's the gold standard. And there's no one kind of profound effect. I mean, think of the films we've seen that we were very moved by. They're all different. You know, I mean, there's a Jewish theme in many of them. But for me, that's the gold standard. You know, did all that skill amount to something beyond a good time, or a convincing ending, or a satisfying ending? You know,
Wicked wasn't the end.
No, right.
It's only the middle.
Well, it was a commercial venture, Joanne. You got to let them make a couple more $100 million or billion globally.
I was shocked when I heard that this was only part one. Is it how many hours?
Well, that's another thing. Films like this are so excessive. They're strenuous to watch, and you feel exhausted because there's so much movement. And I think the kids who grew up on more movement like this, look, we grew up on Bullet, you know, and compared to today's action movies, Bullet's nothing. That chase in San Francisco was wimpy. But they don't realize that they're seduced by the movement and the invention. It's great. You know, I don't mean to display it. I couldn't have imagined the sets for this film or Wicked. But I thought they were just gorgeous, and I admire the craftspeople who did it, the artisans. You have to call them at least artisans. But
so, what did you think of The Brutalist?
I haven't seen it yet. We're going to see that. Has anybody seen The Brutalist?
Yeah, I have.
2. Okay, good. 3. Yeah, well, we want to see it in a theater because it was shot in a very unusual format. So it's supposed to be very crisp. And we'll see. I mean, 3 hours, 3.5 hours plus, including intermission. We'll sit through it. You know, our bladders can take it. But we went to the Flower Moon without going to the bathroom. So films are getting longer. But
it didn't feel like it was that long. The movie.
Yeah, somewhat like another film I haven't programmed for us because it's not. It's called The Irishman. Martin Scorsese, Robert De Niro. It's better than The Goodfellas. It's about, and they age them backwards. These 70, 80-year-old stars we know, they age them backwards to their youth. Very complicated thing. Scorsese never does anything easy. They use 3 cameras to get a 3D picture, so they could really sculpt the faces. 3 cameras for the current action that you see. It just blazed through this. I turned to my wife and I said, it seemed like 2 hours, not 3. You know, and that means you were engaged.
So can I ask you, personal or not, you said you voted for Amelia Perez without having seen The Brutalist? Is that what you said?
Yes, I haven't seen The Brutalist. I have seen Amelia Perez.
But you already voted without having seen The Brutalist?
I didn't feel I could vote for it until I'd seen it. You know, to be fair. But I'm guarded. Like I thought Zone of Interest ended after 30 minutes, and the rest of it was one note. Other people flipped for it, but that's because they haven't. I just got bored. Yeah, I know their story. They're inured to the torture behind them. That's it. You know, and when the flower goes to color, then okay, I get it. That's the statement. So I wasn't that moved by it, but he's running with that because a lot of people who haven't seen a lot of Holocaust movies thought it was great. I think The Brutalist will be better. I expect it to be. So it looks like our next meeting will be on Thursday. I think it's got to be the 13th. The 6th is a little too close for us. And on the 27th, I think that's busy. So it looks like we'll only have one discussion in February, unless you want to do it on a different night. The week of the, it would have to be the week of the 24th. So we could do it Tuesday or Wednesday night if you want. You know, let me know if you're interested. I see all the hands shoot up now. And I don't know what it's going to be. Yes, Steve? Steve Greenberg? Oh, you're for Wednesday or Tuesday night? Okay. All these films we've been talking about will be in theaters, you know, around the Academy Awards, and the winners will continue to be in theaters. So Brutalist is, you know, all these films had a 1-week release in LA and New York. That's how you qualify, and certain film festivals. So who had a chance to see them, you know, when they were in a theater? And some, like those who didn't think they had a chance are already on Amazon, but they're higher priced. I think you can see The Brutalist for $20 if you want. You know, one of these films. And that's films with great expectations put a high price tag. They say, well, in case we lose, let's squeeze all the money out of the buzz around this film that we can. And then we'll only charge $6, you know, when it doesn't win an award. And after it wins an award, it'll be worth more to the streaming. Now, has anybody seen a movie called Sing Sing with Coleman Dominguez? It's a prison drama about a group based on a real group, a theater troupe in prison that uses theatrical plays as therapy for the inmates. And there was another film like this called Weeds a couple of decades ago with John Lee Hancock directed it, and Nick Nolte, I think, was the star. But it's all about a drama, and it's not available online. I looked for it. So this is a real thing. And Coleman Dominguez is just terrific as he was in Rustin. And if you let me look up what I'm thinking about, maybe I can share with you.
Is Sing Sing a true story?
Yes, it is. I mean, the actual story isn't, but there was a real group this was modeled on. And most of the other players are inmates. That's what's remarkable about Sing Sing. So that was interesting. So let me.
So Jim, for February 13th, is the movie The Irishman?
No. It's, you know, again, it's a remarkable achievement in filmmaking and in keeping your engagement up and empathy. But in the end, it's like, okay, let's go out to dinner or let's get some ice cream. You know, it's like, you know, I strive for films that make us stay in our seats longer. We don't leave right away. We're so engaged and so moved by the film that we want it to stay with us. It stays with us. You know, anybody seen The Substance yet? Mitch, let's not ruin it for them. Some people thought it was a comedy. Others, it's about body horror at the end, if you know what that means. And it's about a woman who chases after eternal youth, but her alternate self eats her up, if you can imagine that. And some people thought it was a comedy, and some people thought it was a great movie. It was nominated for Best Direction in one of the festivals, I think maybe the Oscars. And I thought it was horrible. I mean, it made me feel horrible. It made me want to turn my head away. It was that gross. But then at the end, there's some really good laughs when the blob is crawling across the Hollywood Star on Hollywood Boulevard. But it really, it punctures the myth of American feminine beauty and what women will do for the price to be beautiful. So it's a satire. I don't think it's a comedy. There are a couple jokes that are laughable. It is a horror film, and it's very excessive. You know, it didn't need to go that far to make its point. So, ladies, don't bother seeing it. I know you feel that way about it anyway already from my description, but it's nobody needs to see it, because it's a thing. You can be so sensational. All throughout our history, there have been films that are just trying. How can we shock the audience next? How can we gross them out? And they're not all horror films. I think American X was so violent about skinheads. That was one such a film, and there may be others. Steve Greenberg, if you can think of any, chime in. So, none of us need to do that. To be, we've seen enough in our lives to see real horror, and know that life can be gruesome, and we only want to look at it if it's meaningful. Like the Holocaust movies I programmed, um, uh, uh, Song of Names for one, and many others that were just so emotional. They really leave you with something. So that's what I keep looking for. And I was going to look up my some of the films I'm thinking of. I have this long list. The Brutalist, Sing Sing, All Shall Be Well hasn't had its debut yet. It's a Chinese film about two elderly gay women. Pharaoh, Mr. Hoffman, I saw it again. It's pretty good. It's a Holocaust drama. It stars Daniel Auteuil. You've seen him in many French films, a great actor. It's about a Jewish jeweler who hides in the basement of his jewelry shop and pretends that his assistant now runs the shop so the Nazis will avoid them. He sends his family off first, and he's alone and trying to get back to his family, but he can't. It's kind of predictable, but it's very well done. Something I saw in the Palm Springs Festival, which I highly recommend, called Reading Lolita in Tehran, based on a real book, real
I
woman.
read the book. The book
Yeah,
was very
yeah.
good.
By an Iranian academic. And when the revolution in 1979 started, she and her family fled to DC, where she taught for a while. And then she and her husband went back to Tehran, and she started teaching in the universities. And very soon the regime said, no, you can't teach classic English literature. So she started a book group on her own. They met in secret in her apartment, and they read various books that would have been banned. But each of the women has a different story and tells a reason why they're in the book group. And there are different consequences. One is captured and made to sign a false confession about something else. It's kind of compelling. It really is. And if you care about, I don't know, you can see any number of things in it. But if you care about the awfulness of the Iranian regime to this day, it's very scary, but very well done. There's a wonderful movie called The Friend. It's a dog movie. Hey, who likes dog movies? Come on, everybody. And the dog is great. The dog is a Great Dane. It has the most sorrowful face, and it kind of reflects the woman who's Naomi Watts, who's now 46. And she had an affair with a famous author. The author dies, and after her affair with him, he wills her the dog. So she tries not to take it. She has to. She's kind of won over to taking care of it. But it's really about her relationship with the author, making peace with her relationship. So it's a dog movie that isn't really a dog movie, like a horror movie or history that isn't really about history. It's about us, feelings, emotions that we can identify with. I love that kind of film. Then there's a wonderful movie. We have to wait for the LA Jewish Film Festival. He won't sell it to me until they have their pick. I don't know that they'll choose it. It's called Pink Lady. Again, about an Orthodox Jewish family in Jerusalem. And the husband is gay and denies it for quite a while, despite evidence. And finally, she catches him. And that changes everything. And she convinces him to get a divorce. But they do it in a friendly way. Her family, says throw the guy out, but in that world, of course, gay men are ostracized too. It really, again, it's one of these Jewish movies that are like this movie. You take off their skull caps and they're just people, and that's great. If that film made us do that. Another great film, a documentary on Janice Ian. Remember Janice Ian? Yesterday's Child. Come on, you all grew up with Janice Ian. She's still alive, working in Florida. She has an archive. And some woman made a documentary about her. It's very compelling. It's probably the best celebrity documentary I've ever seen. Janice Ian herself, she's the reason why, because she's so forthcoming and candid about her whole life, about her affairs. The music's kind of cute still. And it's a wonderful part of our own history, but you realize this woman really did it her way. It's inspiring. And down in the South Bay at the South Bay Film Festival, he showed it, and they loved it. And they also liked Farewell, Mr. Hoffman, about the jeweler. That was their #4 picture the whole year. That surprised me because there were others on the list that might have been better. But again, like us, it's mostly older people and who they live too far from Laemmle to go see a good movie. And that's really how they describe it. He's got about 3,500 members centered around Torrance and the beach cities and Long Beach. It's a really vibrant society. At his peak, he was playing 42 movies a year at an AMC. And he used to pack them into 3 theaters. He still does that, but he doesn't do 42 films a year. It's more like 30 or 25. And what else? I'm Still Here. This is a much talked about film. The actor, woman, got the Golden Globe Award. It's set in Argentina when the Brazilian regime, like in Argentina, was abducting people and making them missing. Is a military dictatorship. And it's a true story on a woman who has to keep her family together when the husband gets abducted. And it's really a story of her resilience and her dealing with her family and her dealing with a missing husband. Remarkable performance. That was my #1 film at the Palm Springs Film Festival. And then sometime A Real Pain will come out, the Jesse Eisenberg movie about going back with his cousin. Yeah. Mitch, you saw it in the theater, Mitch? Or you paid your $16?
I saw it. I saw it.
In the theater?
Yes.
Yeah. And Nora, which it's about a lap dancer who becomes a real human being for us. And she gets involved with the 18-year-old son of a Russian oligarch. And there's a lot of lap dancing and then chasing people around the city with guns. And it just becomes a whole different world. And it totally changes from being an exploitative movie to being something quite profound. You weep at the end, and I won't tell you why.
No,
I'd
I
like
didn't.
to see it. It's certainly entertaining. It's you won't mind watching it. You may not love it. And so those are the films that are tops on my list. Now I want to talk to you about 3 films. One is 8½, by Federico Fellini. Who's seen 8½, in their youth? Right, and there was a Broadway play called 9. And it's a black and white movie. Marcello Mastroianni is the star. He plays a filmmaker who's stuck. He has director's block. He also has a wife and a mistress who both come to location. And his financial sponsors, everybody drives him crazy. And it's a wonderful, charming movie. And another film about a creative person who's on the run from the truth. It's called Mickey 1, 1965, directed by Arthur Penn, with Warren Beatty as a young man he's being pursued by the mob, but he doesn't know where they are, how much he owes them. And it's all about moving forward with belief, living your life anyway, even though the end may come tomorrow. Very much like this movie that we discussed tonight. That's called Mickey 1. It's really charming. It's also a film about art and what is the function of art and is it meaningful? And then another one I'd like to go back to, Dr. Strangelove. Anybody remember seeing that? Yeah, it's just as scary, if not more scary now. And that's a scary movie that's not meant to be a horror film. That's Terry Southern and Kubrick made that. And it's just scary on the surface. It's a satire of the war room in 1965. In 1964. And it's hilarious. I mean, Peter Sellers plays three roles: the ex-Nazi who's working for the Germans, the president of the United States, and who's the role he plays? I forget. And he's just fabulous. Peter Sellers at his best because the script was so great. And there's all kinds of stuff in it that you will hoot and holler, but you can't take it too seriously. On the other hand, it's a serious film about where they were.
He also plays that colonel who is with what's his name, Ed Begley's son, who threatens to shoot the Coke machine. You can't shoot that; that's government property.
No, isn't that Keenan Wynn?
Yeah, Keenan Wynn, right?
Yeah.
And what's his name plays the colonel, a British colonel who's talking to him and saying, "I've got to put a dime in this machine and call a president."
Yeah, Sterling Hayden. He's all about
no. That's Colonel Ripper.
Yeah, purity.
General Ripper.
He's big on the purity of essence of human body.
No, the Peter Sellers, that was his third role. He plays the president and Dr. Strangelove, and also this British officer who's with a mustache, who's arguing with Keenan Wynn and trying to put the phone in the machine. I mean, the dime in the phone machine.
So it's a funny movie. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. I'm warning you. These are the last three: 8½, Mickey 1, Dr. Strangelove. They're all in black and white, but they're shot beautifully. Top cinematographers photographed these, and there's plenty to watch. And then there's some others I can't even get yet, so I'm not going to tell you about them. But that's what's in our future. Thank you for sharing your opinions. Really, I only run down the films to kind of provoke your input, your participation. You don't need to hear me lecture about the meaning of a scene. I'd rather hear what you thought about it. And then I can lecture about the meaning of a scene, but inspire me, please, because I can easily take a back seat to you in this discussion. I'm just the moderator of the conclave,
You know what's going to be the next one, Jim?
I don't know. It's whatever becomes available. Sing Sing's not available. None of the Palm Springs Festival, which just ended 2 weeks ago, they're all in play to be picked up by a distributor. I may show Mr. Hoffman about the jeweler in Paris.
What about those three that you were recommending? I mean, I saw Dr. Strangelove and 8½, decades ago, so I don't really remember them. I'd love to see them again.
Yeah,
it's really available?
fun. It's really fun. I'll tell you a funny story. I was like 18 or 19 years old. I was home from school on a vacation, and I went to see a movie at the art theater. That's when we had art theaters, for the egg-headed people. So this was 1967 now. Yeah, maybe it was 65, because I saw Dr. Strangelove and Smiles of a Summer Night by Ingmar Bergman. So everybody thought both films were really high-minded, and nobody laughed during Dr. Strangelove. And I didn't realize that nobody got the jokes. It's like, and it helps if you see a comedy with a lot of people. So it went over a lot of people's heads in 1965 because it was just too sarcastic, and it was perceived as an art film. I don't know how much money it made, but all right. So maybe to please Betty, we'll show one of those. I'd like to show all three of them together because 8½, and Mickey 1 have themes in common. The lost man who's running away from something and doesn't know where to go to. It's a crisis of confidence, an existential crisis. What am I? Who am I? What am I doing here? What's my purpose? And Dr. Strangelove is just funny. But it also shows that in the 60s, there were some really cool films that were made that don't get much notice. And these are really groundbreaking films in their own way. And, I could show Doubt, the Meryl Streep movie about the nun and the priest who's accused of abusing somebody. And that's a great movie. I mean, anything with Meryl Streep is good. The Apartment with directed by Billy Wilder, Jack Lemmon, and what's her name? Shirley MacLaine.
Shirley MacLaine.
Yeah. A much decorated film. much decorated. And it's about a guy who's a stooge, and he lets his boss use his apartment so he can have some private time with his mistress, Shirley MacLaine, and other people. And they form a relationship, and eventually it turns into something. So it's just a lovely written. It's probably I.L. Diamond, who's the author, frequent collaborator of Billy Wilder. I see, for all these films, I see 2 or 3 that don't pass muster. You want to hear some of my no's? Oh, Canada, I saw the Richard Gere is in it, and it's what's his name? Cat Lady people, the obscure Canadian, tall guy, white hair. His name will come to me. It's not worth watching. Traveler's Needs. No, I didn't see that. Shelter with Paul Bettany. No. A Real Job, French school teacher story. No. I can go on and on. Some of these films don't age well. I remember them from my youth, and some are not available. Oh, I saw American Blues. It's a Marty Ritt film with Sidney Poitier and Paul Newman as musicians in Paris. But again, it's not. What's there to talk about? The film is very clear. It's very good. But so what? What can we take home from it? That's my gold standard. Okay, so thanks for listening. Thanks for coming and participating. Charles, please join us again. It was great to see you tonight, even though you're in shadow. And I will see you probably on the, what did I say? On the 13th of February. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Douglas.